Hello guys! You must have been eagerly looking forward to the next writer of the 20th century, and that is Aldous Huxley. You can see him here. He wears quite thick glasses. He had a serious eye problem as well. Aldous Huxley was born in 1894 and he died in 1963. Huxley was a novelist, short story writer, poet, and playwright. And he was the member of an illustrious family, deeply rooted in England's literary and scientific tradition. He was one of the preeminent intellectuals of his time, and he was not just a writer, he was a pacifist, a humanist, and a satirist as well. Hey, Huxley was related to Matthew Arnold. His mother was Matthew Arnold's niece. In 1911, Huxley suffered from an illness which made him half blind. And blindness and vision became motives that permeate much of his writing. Huxley edited Oxford Poetry in 1916. That is a very famous anthology. And Huxley was friends with many important writers and thinkers of the time. He taught George Orwell at Eton College. Huxley met Bloomsbury figures including Bertrand Russell and Clive Bell. And he describes his experience of India in his travel book, Jesting Pilot. D.H. Lawrence and Ray Bradbury were his friends. Ray Bradbury, is a science fiction writer. And he edited Lawrence's letters following Lawrence's death in 1930. In 1937, Huxley moved to Hollywood in the US with his family and friend Gerald Heard. Now, Gerald Heard is an important figure because Gerald Heard introduced Huxley to Vedanta. Huxley was interested in Eastern philosophy and spirituality. It was his friend Gerald Heard who introduced him to Vedanta, meditation, and vegetarianism through the principle of ahimsa. In 1944, Huxley wrote the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita, subtitled The Song of God, translated by Swami Prabhavananda and Christopher Isherwood. Swami Prabhavananda, along with the 1930s poet Christopher Isherwood, wrote Bhagavad Gita, the Song of God. Apart from these, Huxley had other interests too. In the late 40s, he started to experiment with psychedelic drugs. And he also maintained an interest in occult phenomena like hypnotism. He wrote a comparative study of mysticism called The Perennial Philosophy. And he wrote screenplays for films, including Madame Curie, it's the name of a film, Pride and Prejudice, and Jane Eyre. Finally, Huxley died of cancer in November 1963. On the same day, that is 22nd November, on the same day, President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and the British author C.S. Lewis also passed away on that day. The first novel by Huxley, the debut novel, is Crome Yellow, 1921, just before the modernist period started with a bang. Crome Yellow satirizes the post-Victorian norms of morality and the fashions of the time. The story is set in a house where a party is going on. I told you, party is an important motif in modernist literature. The story of a house party at Crome, a parodic version of Garsington Manor. There was an actual house called Garsington Manor, the home of Lady Ottoline Morrell. That was a house where authors like Huxley and T.S. Eliot used to gather and write. So, Crome is a parody of Garsington Manor. The novel Crome Yellow is written in the vein of the English country house novel as practiced by Thomas Love Peacock. Thomas Love Peacock was an earlier writer who wrote the 4 Ages of Poetry and novels such as Headlong Hall, Mellin Court, Nightmare Abbey. Now, Crome Yellow is set in the backdrop of a house party, as you know. On vacation from school, Dennis Stone, the protagonist, he's a naive young poet. He goes to stay at the house called Crome, an English country house. His hosts there are Henry Wimbush and his wife Priscilla. Henry Wimbush and his wife Priscilla are the hosts, and they are joined by a party of colorful guests. Dennis is staying at that house called Crome, and his stay there proves to be a disaster after his weak attempts to attract Anne Wimbush, the daughter of Henry and Priscilla. And Dennis has to endure the ridicule regarding his plan to write a novel about love and art. In the end, Dennis leaves Crome more confused about life than when he came. He is not enlightened, but he is disillusioned. The next novel is Antic Hay, 1923. Antic Hay is a comic novel. There is a strain of comedy running through all of Huxley's novels. Antic Hay is a comic novel set in London showing post-war disillusionment. It depicts the aimless, amoral, and meaningless life of self-absorbed cultural elite, the elite people's lives, the self-absorbed elite people's lives it shows in the turbulent post-World War I period. So Antic Hay is set just after the World War, and it shows the upper class elite characters, the aimless, amoral, and meaningless life of these characters. Antic Hay shows the loss of values in a society that is slowly moving towards destruction. In the post-World War period, the society is slowly moving towards destruction. Antic Hay is a reference from Marlowe's Edward II, referring to the pleasures arranged by Gaveston for the king to distract him from the important matters of the court. Edward II is the king, Gaveston is his homosexual partner, and Gaveston is arranging some distractions for the king in order to distract him from the matters of the court. That is called Antic Hay. In Huxley's novel, Antic Hay refers to the mundane distractions of the post-war London. In post-war London also there are distractions. The neon lights of the Piccadilly Circus. All the, distractions of the city. The shopping malls and alcohol, art, sex, and so on. Another novel that came again 2 years later is Those Barren Leaves. Those Barren Leaves is a satirical novel on the pretensions of the cultural elite. Remember, this is a theme that runs in his earlier novel also. The pretensions of the cultural elite. The title Those Barren Leaves is drawn from the poem The Tables Turned by Wordsworth. William Wordsworth's The Tables Turned. That is where the title is drawn from. Enough of science and of art. Close up those barren leaves. Come forth and bring with you a heart that watches and receives. Those are the lines by Wordsworth. Those Barren Leaves is the story of Mrs. Aldwinkle and her companions. Mrs. Aldwinkle and her friends are visiting an Italian palace. Who are the friends? They are a poet, a novelist, a philosopher, and a pair of lovers. A poet, a novelist, a pair of lovers, and a philosopher. They are gathered in a renovated Italian palace to relive the glories of Renaissance. The story is set against that. Another novel is Point Counterpoint, 1928. It happens to be Huxley's longest novel. It's a complex and serious novel involving a large number of characters. The title is drawn from music, and an idea related to Huxley can be seen here: musicalization of fiction. In Point Counterpoint, Huxley attempts to musicalize fiction. Musicalization of fiction is an idea associated with Huxley. Here again there is a party, a high-profile party hosted by Lord Tantamount. One plot line involves the murder of Everard Webley. That is one of the plots. Everard Webley is murdered. He is the leader of a radical political group. And Spandrel is the man who orchestrated the murder. Spandrel. Finally, Spandrel destroys himself by forcing the police to kill him. In these modernist and early modernist novels, there's a lot of irony and a lot of ennui. Being fed up with this life, with this age. Spandrel destroys his own life by forcing the police to kill him. The other plot line, so this was Everard Webley and Spandrel was one plot line in Point Counterpoint. Please make some codes and remember, CODES, codes. The other plot line in the novel follows some characters including Lord Tantamount's spoiled daughter Lucy. Lucy is the spoiled daughter of one Lord Tantamount. She pursues sexual pleasure at the expense of others. The novel thus contrasts or counterpoints the tragic lives of the psychosexually excessive with the equally tragic lives of the religiously and intellectually excessive. The psychosexually excessive and the intellectually and religiously excessive, two people. Brave New World, 1932, was his first dystopian novel. The title derives from Miranda's speech in The Tempest. Act 5, Scene 1. Brave New World is inspired by the utopian novels of H.G. Wells. It is a dystopian novel, quite the opposite. Set in the future, in AF 632, approximately 7 centuries after the 20th century. AF stands for after Ford. Ford, the automobile god or the industrialist, is the god of the new world. There is a new world beginning from Ford. It was named after the industrialist Henry Ford. What is the context of the novel? Civilization has been destroyed by a great war. And after the Great War, a 9 years war again happened, reminiscent of the First World War. A 9 years war ushered in the era of Ford, ensuring stability through dictatorship. There is a 5-tiered caste system in this world. Alphas and betas, scientists and politicians, they are the upper class. Alphas and betas are the scientists and politicians, the highest class. Below them is gammas, deltas and epsilons. They are the industrial working class. The working classes are very different in identity and lifestyle from the upper classes. The working classes are mass produced and they have no freedom. A drug called soma ensures that no one ever feels pain or remains unhappy. Everybody is held in a state of pleasure with the drug called soma. The population is controlled through scientific methods. People are not allowed to live free lives. Marriage is forbidden. Children are produced in an embryo factory from a bottle. In the place called hatchery, like eggs are hatched, children are mass produced of the lower classes, the gammas, deltas and epsilons. Now the protagonist is Bernard Marx. He is an upper class alpha plus psychologist. And in this materialistic world where everybody is artificially kept happy in pleasure, Bernard Marx is the only discontented person. He is unhappy. See, people who are intelligent and people who think for themselves, they will not be completely happy. They will be unhappy. Happiness or pleasure, mindless pleasure is a sign of complete happiness, or mindless pleasure is a sign of unintelligence. Now, Bernard Marx is discontented and unhappy. The promiscuous Lenina Crown, she is a promiscuous woman. She agrees to spend a week with him at the Savage Reservation in New Mexico. Down south in New Mexico, there is a Savage Reservation, name of a reservation camp. She agrees to spend time with him there illegally. It is wrong. People are not supposed to be in love. They are not supposed to have sex. They are not supposed to get married. And before Bernard leaves, his superior Tomakin spontaneously reveals that long ago he too had visited the Savage Reservation, and there he had lost the woman who accompanied him. Embarrassed by this disclosure, because that is an illegal thing that the superior officer Tomakin did. So embarrassed by the disclosure of his socially unacceptable emotion, Tomakin turns on Bernard and threatens to exile him to Iceland. The boss is now upset because the subordinate Bernard has now got to know the boss's secret. He wants to exile Bernard to Iceland. However, Bernard goes to the reservation, Savage Reservation. On the reservation, Lenina and Bernard accidentally meet Linda and John the Savage, one mother and son. Who are they? They are the woman and son Tomakin had abandoned there years ago. Lenina and Bernard accidentally meet Linda and John, John is the son of Tomakin. Linda stayed on at the reservation and raised Tomakin's son John. She had got pregnant and she stayed on to raise the boy, and the boy has now grown up without knowing the world. Bernard gains permission to take John and his mother back to Utopia. Utopia is the mainland, the main place. John is actually the protagonist of Brave New World, but John is not introduced until the middle of the novel. Until then, Bernard was the protagonist. When Bernard presents the pair to Tomakin, he resigns from his position because his secret and his illegal activity is now discovered. So when Bernard presents the pair, Linda and John, the pair, he has to resign from his position, Bernard, having become an object of ridicule. Bernard no longer has to worry about being exiled to Iceland. Bernard is safe. Tomakin cannot do anything more to him. John becomes the object of everyone's curiosity and amusement, because in Utopia or in the mainland, nobody has seen a natural human being like John for a long time. John is a natural human being. And John is soon repulsed by the ways of the new world. John cannot stand the utopians or the people. Lenina, meanwhile, is attracted to John. Remember, she is a promiscuous woman. And she tries to seduce him, and John resists her advances. When his mother dies, John goes crazy and tries to convert the utopians to his way of thinking. John becomes like a guru or a messiah to them. He tries to convert them. Many of the utopians are converted and a rebellion results. Bernard and his friend Helmholtz Watson are blamed for the rebellion and are exiled by Mustafa Mond, the resident controller. He is like the big brother. Bernard and his friend are blamed for the rebellion and they are exiled by Mustafa Mond. John is, however, retained for further experimentation. He resists and tries to flee and commits suicide. He cannot belong there. He is like Septimus Warren Smith. He cannot belong here. He cannot sell his soul, and he commits suicide. Now, Brave New World is very similar to 1984 in many ways. Both show dystopias. Both show governments that oppress the people through propaganda. But there are also significant differences. One of my viewers in YouTube and one of my students was asking me the other day the difference between Brave New World and 1984. Her name is Debjani. So for Debjani's sake, I introduced this slide because I was sure that it will help a lot of you. In the Brave New World, remember, the citizens are controlled through pleasure, whereas in 1984 they are controlled through fear. It is not fear here, but pleasure. How is fear created there? Through oppressive intrusions into people's lives through technology. Remember in 1984? In Brave New World, the government is not always present in daily life, whereas in 1984, through telescreens, etc., the government is continuously present. The big brother is always watching. In Brave New World and 1984, both, there is propaganda. In Brave New World, propaganda is through brainwashing and drugs. Like Soma. People don't remember anymore and they are held in a state of childish pleasure. Whereas in 1984, it is through language. Newspeak is the language, and you can't even think against the big brother. That is a thought crime. It is more repressive in 1984. In Brave New World, technology has a deeper impact. It even creates human beings and completely controls them, mind controls them. In 1984, technology is still developing. The purpose of technology is to monitor. Even when people do exercise, it is monitored by the telescreens. When Winston Smith in 1984 does not touch his toes properly, the telescreen asks him to touch his toes properly while exercising. So 1984 uses technology to monitor people and control them. Today, it has become a similarly totalitarian world. All the time people are realizing this. Governments have complete control over you because of surveillance. Today also, your mobile phones are like a tracking device. Many of the government apps are like tracking devices. The major difference between Brave New World and 1984 is that in Brave New World, there is a acquiescence of the people. The people do not rebel because it is not possible for them to rebel. They are controlled by the state apparatuses, which are ideological state apparatuses. They thought control them, they mind control them. and the people ultimately like it. Whereas 1984 is more repressive. Repressive state apparatuses are found in 1984. Repressive state apparatuses such as police, the thought police in 1984. Ideological state apparatuses and repressive state apparatuses are terms used by Louis Althusser. In Brave New World, the people, especially the lower classes, are mass produced and no rebellion is possible even, whereas in 1984, there is rebellion happening. Emmanuel Goldstein and his brotherhood signals rebellion, and Winston Smith and Julia also start to rebel against the government at the end. Now another novel is Eyeless in Gaza. It's a best-selling novel and it recalls the biblical story of Samson and Delilah. The title Eyeless in Gaza is a phrase from Samson's soliloquy in John Milton's Samson Agonistes. Eyeless in Gaza focuses on the life of the socialite Anthony Bevis. Socialite he is. Very socially important guy. From childhood to the age of 42, when he changes from intellectual escapism to responsibility. This is a modernist theme. The protagonist, from childlike simplicity and irresponsibility, growing into maturation. You can see that in Jacob's room a little bit. Here, Anthony Bevis is also maturing from intellectual escapism to responsibility, from fragmentation to unity, and from egoism to selflessness. In the case, like in the case of Samson, I said best-selling here as well as in this previous slide. Like in the case of Samson, at the end, Anthony Bevis comes to realize that his blindness and bondage are due to his own fault. The narrative style is not continuous or orderly. The novel has 54 chapters, each describing a brief episode with no transitions in between. It is a peculiar narrative style. Some more later novels, After Many a Summer, Time Must Have a Stop. Please study the chronological order of the novels of the major writers. It's very important. After Many a Summer is a grotesque narrative of Stoit, a Hollywood millionaire with an obsessive fear of death. The fear of death is a very important motif in post-war literature. Somebody can do research on that. Time Must Have a Stop has Sebastian Barnack, a 17-year-old poet. He holidays with his pleasure-loving uncle in Florence. The title is taken from Hotspur's death speech in Shakespeare's Henry IV, Part 1. Time Must Have a Stop. Ape and Essence is again a dystopian satire. The first dystopian satire by Huxley was Brave New World. Ape and Essence is also dystopian. The last novel in this slide, Island, is also dystopian. So Ape and Essence begins with two movie industry intellectuals rescuing a screenplay titled Ape and Essence from the trash on the day of Gandhi's death, that is 30th January 1948. So Ape and Essence, this denotes a screenplay within the novel. The second section of the novel is the screenplay itself. And in the second section, Ape and Essence, remember ape. Here, there are intelligent baboons or apes, representing humans, destroying their world through nuclear and chemical warfare. The baboons are destroying their own world, like human beings are good at doing. The Genius and the Goddess is about a scientist, a genius scientist who is also a Nobel laureate, and his wife. The scientist. There are three people actually. The scientist who is a Nobel laureate and his wife is there. And then there is another younger scientist, John Rivers. John Rivers starts a love affair with the Nobel Prize winner's wife. That is the genius and the goddess. Now, Island describes a doomed utopia named Pala. We laugh in class because in Kerala there is a place called Pala. Island describes a doomed utopia called Pala that contrasts with his earlier vision of dystopia. A central aspect of Pala's ideal culture is the hallucinogenic drug called moksha. In Brave New World, the drug was called Soma. All these are Indian names, as you know. Huxley was interested in Indian philosophy and culture. So that's all about Aldous Huxley now. Huxley, one thing I did not mention, Huxley was interested in time. Huxley was interested in the concept of time. Many modernists were interested in the concept of time, and Huxley also. He has written about it as a theme in his works. So please do read more about Huxley. This is only a brief introduction. Your own research is necessary. Thank you very much.